Today we're going to talk about bringing kids to shul. Judaism places great emphasis on families and on being mechanech children and training them in the right things. So we're going to talk a little bit about today perspectives on bringing young children to shul. So first question is, why yes? Why would you bring a young child to shul if he's not necessarily ready to daven the whole thing, b'kavana and everything of that nature? So the Gemara in Chagiga Daf Gimel Amud Aleph tells us, with regard to the mitzvah of hakel, that taf lama ba'im, why do we bring the children to hakel? They don't understand what's going on. Anyway, litein tzchar l'mivi'ehem, says Tosos on the spot, va'al zeh samchu lahavi katanim lebeis hakneses. That's what we rely on when we bring children to shul. It's an interesting lashon, samchu, that we rely on it, as if inherently there's a problem, but it's worth it because we're going to get schar for wanting to bring our children into a holy environment. It probably relates to exposure to kedusha. That's what we want to. The Gemara tells a story of one of the Amoraim that became great because his mother always exposed him to Mekomos HaKodesh, to holy places, to the Beis Medrash, and that Kol Torah, even though he didn't know what was going on, had an impact on him in some way. And therefore, if a child is consistently exposed to an environment of kedusha, that could be something that's very beneficial for the child. And in fact, in the side of the page there, in Chagiga Daf Gimel points out that Tosfos gets this from Maseches Sofrim, where it says that it is the minhag to bring children to shul, litein schar, to give schar l'mevi'ehem. So that's one reason why, yes, just to expose them to kedusha, to give schar l'mevi'ehem. But then there's another reason why, yes, and that is the child ultimately, when he becomes a bar bas mitzvah, is going to have to know how to participate in tefillah. And how does one learn how to participate in tefillah if not by being mechanich the child to participate in tefillah? You can't be mechanich him at home. You have to be mechanich him by being able to see how it works. The Ramah writes in Hilchos Chazaras Hashatz in Siman Kuf Chav Dalid Siv Zayin v'yelamed banav hakatanim sheyanu amein, that when the child is in shul, you should teach him how to answer amein at Chazaras Hashatz. Ki miyad shati, we should teach the adults how to do it too. Ki miyad shatino gona amein yesh lo chelek li'olam haba. Because as soon as a child knows how to answer amein, he gets a chelek in olam haba just for answering amein. So it's worth, and it doesn't take a very old child to know how to answer amein, to say that word. It's a very easy word to pronounce. So it sounds like we're talking about a very young child over here. He should be there for Chazaras Hashatz to answer amein. The Ramah in Kuf Mem Tes Sif Aleph writes, V'yesh kasvu sheba matinokos l'nashek haTorah. When he talks about putting back the Sefer Torah, now you're supposed to walk the Torah back to the Aron and stand there till the Aron is closed, etc. He writes that there are some that say that you should bring the children to kiss the Torah, kedei lechavava, in order to show chibuv, in order to show love for the Torah, ulezarzim b'mitzvos, and to encourage them in mitzvos, v'chei noagin, and that's the minhag. So again, young children being brought in order to kiss the Torah. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Tafresh Pei Tesif Aleph adds that the minhag is minhag tov, to bring children to hear Mikra Megillah in shul as well. And the Bir Halacha points out we must be talking about children under the age of chinuch, because if it's over the age of chinuch, then l'chora, what do you mean minhag tov? It would be a chiyuv to bring them to shul, not just a minhag tov. So it sounds like Bir Halacha concludes not this way, but it sounds like the simple reading of the Shulchan Aruch that we're talking about even children below the age of chinuch. So that's a second advantage of bringing children to shuls, to be mechanich them in the mitzvos. And then a third reason, which maybe is not a halachic reason, that many people do bring children to shul, is that daddy wants to give mommy a break. Mommy can use a few extra minutes of sleep on Shabbos morning if you get the kids out of the house and you get them to shul, so that will give mommy some time to relax a little bit, to rest a little bit. She's stressed out from the whole week or whatever. So that is, it's a very good thing to do, to give mommy a break. It's just, we can always question whether shul is the appropriate place to do that. Maybe the guy shouldn't go to shul. Maybe you should go take the kids to the park and he'll daven some other time, or he'll daven at a different minyan or whatever. But that's a third reason that often people are motivated to want to bring the kids to shul. Why not? What would be the problem with bringing kids to shul? Mishbur writes in Simon Sadivav Sivkat and Dalid that having them in front of you can be a distraction. Having kids in front of you, they're so cute. It's hard to focus on HaKadosh Baruch Hu when you have these adorable little kids there that are in front of you, and you're focused on them, and are they behaving? And it's they say that a parent who's so busy making sure that his kid is behaving and that he's sitting nicely and pointing to the words in the siddur for him, so that when the kid grows up, that's what he's gonna do. He's also not going to daven. He's also just going to be taking care of his kids and pointing to the words in the siddur. The parents who davens the whole time, so when the kid grows up, he'll daven the whole time. So that's one issue. That's an interesting issue. The fact that it could be a distraction, kavana. People don't often think of that. Kaf HaChaim writes in one place that he thinks that it's problematic even to look at children while you're davening, because all of your love and all your feelings of love should be geared toward HaKadosh Baruch Hu, similar to what the Ramah writes, that a person is not supposed to kiss children in shul, because all love expressed in the Beis HaKnesses should be expressed directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Kaf HaChaim even goes so far as to say, and even just looking at the children, caressing the child's cheek or whatever, that's an expression of love that's not appropriate for a shul. They say Rav Soloveitchik, I heard in the name of Rav Soloveitchik, but I'm not sure, I don't know if this is printed anywhere, that Rav Soloveitchik said that one of the tainas he had against family seating, he fought very hard in Melchamas Mitzvah against taking down the mechitzas in shul, which was a very popular thing to do in the 1950s across America. So he fought very, very hard about mechitzas, and one of the many points that apparently he made was that it's not about hanging out together as a family. The family that prays together stays together. That's not really our thing. You're praying. It's a very lonely experience with you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not supposed to be a family experience to be how could a person be with his parents and with his children, whatever, and say Avivi mi azvuni v'Hashem yasveni, that I have no family. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the only one that can save me. But a second and more common reason given not to bring very young children to shul is that very often it is a disturbance in the shul, and that's what Bir Halacha writes in Tafresh Peites Vav, that it's hard to imagine that when the Mechaber says that it's a minhag tov to bring kids to Megillah reading, it's hard to imagine he's talking about kids below the age of chinuch, because below the age of chinuch they disrupt. And disruption, that's not okay. He says, Rak mevalbelin, kamosh kasim magen Avram. All they do is they mevalbel everything. So he says, what the Mechaber must mean over there is that it's a minhag tov to bring kids who are of the age of chinuch rather than rely on reading the Megillah to them separately at home. Minhag tov to have them participate in shul rather than at home. But below the age of chinuch, he says they have no business being there. Not only that, the Magen Avram in Simon Sadi Chesiv Katan Aleph writes that if you look in the Shloah Kadosh, Korei Tagar ala Maviyim Yiladim Lebeis HaKnesses, he has very strong words again against those who bring children to shul. Mishra Bru over there in Sivkat Gimel writes that a little more expansively, V'hainu Ktanim Adayin Lo Igiu L'Chinuch Mitam Ki HaYiladim Mesachkim Umeraktim Bebeis HaKnesses. What are they going to be doing in shul? They're going to be playing. They're going to be running around. Umechalim Kedushas Beis HaKnesses. They're going to be mechal the Kedusha. They're not going to have the proper kavod for the shul. V'gam Mevalbelim Dasam Espalalim. They're going to mess up the kavanas of other people. V'od gam ki yaskinu lo yosuru miminagam harash and eschanchu bi'aldusam. And what do you think they're going to do when they get older? They're also not going to respect the shul, because they'll never have learned that shul is a place of ema, yira, retas, v'zeya, right? They're never going to learn that it's a place of trepidation, of fear, of yir shemayim. They're going to be lishtagol, levazos, kedushas beis haknesses. Aval k'shigil l'chinuch, Adrabah, Yivienu also the Beis HaKnesses. Once at the age of chinuch, bring them and teach them how to sit, be'ema, be'ira, v'lo yanichenu lazuz mimkomo. Don't let them move. V'yizarzehu lanos amein, v'kadishu kedusha. Teach them how to respond to the tefillah, how to participate in the tefillah. Shloah Kadosh goes even stronger. If you actually look up the lashon of the Shloah Kadosh, he describes what happens when the little kids are in shul. He says it's like being in the town square. It's like they're playing in the park. This one takes out his bag of toys, and this one brings out his bag of snacks. And he describes Yakumul Tzachik Zemzeh. They get up to play with each other. Zem Maka Ezeh. This one hits that one. V'zem Meranein. V'zem Bocha. And this one's screaming, he hit me. And this one's crying. V'zem Medaber. V'zem We've seen this. We've seen this scene play out in shuls. V'yesha sheyasa tzrachav beis haknes v'yoz yom rumayim. Then he goes even further. Kid is going to be yosa tzrachav beis haknes and say, oh look, water. Okay, so you'll make a little waterfall in shul. But the Shul HaKadosh says this is not right. That children should be who are of such an age where they're not going to be able to sit properly to be in shul to disrupt everything. This is very similar to the idea that you shouldn't cause a disturbance in general. All of Hilchos Tefillah is laced with these halachos about how not to do anything that will disrupt someone's kavanah. Don't walk in front of someone who's davening. Don't hold anything that you're going to be focused on rather than be focused on your tefillah. Have a makom kavua where you're used to and you're not going to be distracted. Daven right in front of a wall so that you're not going to see things that will distract you. Everything is about creating an environment where you won't be disrupted. So if you're bringing kids who can't help but to disrupt into a shul, you're ruining that environment that all of Hilchos Tefillah is geared toward building. It's also a lack of cover for the Beis HaKnesses in general. If a kid has to bring out his Transformer toys and his whatever to entertain himself, so that doesn't really have a place in a Beis HaKnesses. That's a bizayon to the Kedushas Beis HaKnesses. So what often happens, though, is that a parent brings a child to shul because the kid promises, I'm going to behave. I'm going to be quiet, I'm going to behave. But the father says, but it's going to be a long davening. Are you going to be able to behave the whole time? And the 4-year-old, knowing that a long time means about 32 seconds, is about as long a time as they can imagine. That's about forever in their minds. They say, yes, I'll do it for a long time. But they can't imagine that it's going to go on for minutes and then hours and whatever. They cannot. So then the kid starts misbehaving. So what do you do then? So first of all, here's what you don't do. You don't make a scene. And you don't start yelling at the child and getting angry at the child. It's not the kid's fault. It's the parent's fault. Right? That's a davar pashut. A child is a child. There's no reason, so they're doing what they're supposed to do. They're acting like a child, but it's not the kids. It's not the kid's fault. It's the parents' fault. Second of all, the Shari Tshuva writes in Kuf Dalet Sivkat and Aleph that if the child is disrupting, you're not allowed to talk in the middle of Shemona Esrei, but you are allowed to walk in the middle of Shemona Esrei. Pick the child up, even in the middle of Shemona Esrei, walk out of shul. Most people make that mistake. Instead, they sit there arguing with the kid, whatever, trying to calm down, and it ends up causing a whole scene. Much better. Second, he makes a noise. You go one time shush, and he doesn't. Pick him up and walk out of shul, and that's fine. That's better than talking during Shemona Esrei. So, l'maisa, what should a person do in terms of making this decision? So, first of all, I remember when my oldest son, was about 3-4 years old. I was assistant rabbi in a shul in Lawrence, and Rav Shechter was there for Shabbos, and Rav Shechter asked me at the end of davening, where's your son? I said, he's 3 or 4 years old, he can't daven yet. He said, but can he sit quietly? Now, every kid is different. My oldest son happens to be, he's very misudar, and, he does what you tell him. And he was able to sit quietly at that age the whole time. He said, if he can sit quietly, then you should bring him. Because being in that environment of Kedusha, if you could be mechanech him properly and not do an anti-chinuch by bringing him to shul, then of course, litein schar lemiviyehen. But if he can't, then you don't, even if it's going to be till he's much, much older. Second thing is, the parent has to be realistic. You have to daven in a minyan that they can handle. I love chazanas, so I'm going to go to the 4.5-hour minyan and expect that my kid is going to love it too and he's going to enjoy it. You have to be realistic about what kind of minyan the child can handle, or how much of davening the child can handle. Maybe you'll walk him home during davening. You'll miss parts of davening to do it, but whatever you have to take care of. Whatever you have to be realistic about the expectation. Maybe bring him to a mincha instead of bringing him. And third thing is, parents have to know that they can say no to a child. That parents are still the boss. And if the child says, but I want to, so it's fair for a parent to say, you know what, in my assessment, you're not ready yet, and maybe as a reward, if you do well at mincha, then I'll take you next time for Kabbalah Shabbos Mariv, and if you do well there, then to build up, and the parent ultimately has the right to make that call. The parent does not have the right to to give in to their child, because it's the path of least resistance if it's going to be on everyone else's cheshbon. So it's a great thing to bring kids to shul. Shuls should be kid-friendly places, but we have to make sure that it's a place where we're being mechanich the children, doing a service to them, not a disservice to them, mechanich them to understand what the experience of being in shul is really all about.